Yo,
Hello, hello.
yo.
Hola, how are you
Hola.
tonight? Yeah, we'll get a minute just to chit chat, and in a couple, once we've got a few more people, we're going to dive into texture, shape, and form this week. So lots going on. Hey, everybody, welcome.
Hi.
Good to
Here
see
you
you
are.
all. In the meantime, can I just say, wow, oh my gosh, it has been so much fun watching all of the sketches come through this week, and just to see everybody's different styles and ways of approaching the exact same homework, and yet it's all so different. So, all right. So I'm going to be going through the agenda real quick, and then we're going to dive into the tour. So first, we are going to check out in detail the three elements of art: shape, form, and texture. So those are the three elements that not only are we going to be practicing with today, but we're going to actually be putting them all together this week and finding different ways that these elements work together to create really cool effects. So you're going to get lots of examples of those three elements. Then in our class tonight, we're going to work on shifting from a two-dimensional shape. I hope you remember from last week's video, a shape is 2D, a form is 3D. So height and width, shape, get that depth in its form. And then finally, texture. We're going to add texture to show how things could reach out and feel. So we're going to be taking circles, turning them into spheres. We're going to take some squares and turn them into cubes. And then we're going to add some cool texture on top. So we've got a busy night of drawing ahead of us. So let's go ahead. I'm going to share my screen. Welcome to my Pinterest boards. So I am a hyperactive Pinterester, and it's a wonderful visual search engine if you're a visual person like myself. And we're going to be just exploring a couple different types of shape today. So these shapes have all been squished together to make something a little bit more interesting than just your typical rows of geometry class squares and stars and rectangles and cubes. And I wanted to give you all some examples of ways that shape is used in design. And this could be something that could be a background of a poster, or just some kind of cool, hip, backboard at a restaurant or something. So we see squares, we see rectangles, we see little Tetris pieces. It's nothing too terribly fancy, but just through repetition, the shape becomes much more engaging. And whenever you start looking around you for shape, you're going to start to notice a lot of repeated patterns and interesting designs that you might not have normally seen. And repetition and shape work really well together. Here's another one. Now, instead of geometric shapes that we just looked at, these simple shapes, of course, they're oranges, we call these organic shapes. So with organic shapes, they're not something you could calculate in your math class, but they are the shapes that we see in nature. And then we have some kind of sort of Native American inspired designs here. So shape really takes on a whole new life of its own and personality when you start adding color and when you start adding pattern and create your own designs. So you're going to see more of this coming up. Your homework this week definitely includes coming up with some of your very own shape design patterns. And so something even as simple as a triangle can be warped, that we can stretch out these shapes, we're able to see that shape is being used in a much more. All right, so I just wanted to get your eyes and brains kind of turned on to some of the different ways that shape is used. So you've probably seen some cool designs like this in rugs, or I'm just so jealous of Diane out there in Guatemala, which is known for its incredible shapes and designs in their textiles. Okay, so that is shape. That's all we're really going to touch on as far as looking at designs and shape today. But you'll be seeing more of these kinds of patterns and designs whenever you do your drawing homework this week. So there's organic, there's geometric. But what we're really going to focus on this week is how shape is used to create form. So in order to create this three-dimensional illusion that something is popping off the page, here we are again in Pinterest. This is my form page. And I'm going to be posting these Pinterest binders on our group wall, so you'll be able to check those out. Here we can see the shape on the left sidebar and how you create the form on the right. That's really our main focus this week. Taking that shape, popping it out with a third dimension. And it's all about the element that we practiced last week, value. We're going to be thinking about where our light source comes in and how that light source is going to affect the highest, brightest highlight, where the light is hitting it, the medium tones, where maybe there's just that little bit of light catching it, and then the darkest darks. We're developing into form. And let me just show off a little bit more forms. I'll tell you, we're keeping it really simple this week. I will be posting this just in case someone is a maestro of cubes and spheres and they think they're ready to try a dodecahedron form. But I'll tell you, I myself still get something out of every sphere I draw. And that's in pencil or pen or whatever medium you want to use. And today, by the way, all you need is a pencil. If you'd like to draw in pen, that is totally up to you. But this whole page is a resource that I will be posting this week for you to refer back to. And you'll notice in a lot of these are many of them taken straight from art textbooks. You see your value scale shown over and over again. So you'll actually see in our drawing guide homework this week that I have recommended that you do just a little warm-up of a value scale before you get started. That'll just get that full range activated in your hand, and you want that full range of values in order to create convincing three-dimensional forms. So we're going to deep dive into form in a little bit here, but just to really sparkle your brains, I want to show you a little bit of the final element we'll be diving into today, and that is texture. This whole week, not just today. So I think some of you might have heard before that texture is my own personal weakest link. So all of us have something in drawing that does not come easily to us. And for some people, it's nailing down a shape. Other people, the different shadows of a value scale. For me, I think what is tricky about texture is the patience and slowing down to do something that is minute. But the effects of texture are just stunning whenever they're done well. And just to zoom in on one example, here we see a close-up. It looks like a bark of a wood grain texture. That looks like a metal grate, perhaps, and there could be a leaf vein. This kind of detailed work is almost photorealistic, and it's stunning because our eye wants to slow down and look at all the teeny tiny little lines that have been pulled together to create the textures that we're seeing. Does anybody have anything that they particularly notice that's helping this texture show through effectively? Oh, hey, Linda. Judith, yeah?
So the top three, I can really feel the texture. The bottom one, I don't as much. I feel it's more pattern, but not texture.
Interesting. Yeah. My guess is that this is simply like a metal grate texture. It's not a very particularly interesting one, and absolutely you nailed it. It's got that repeated circle shape. I think it's just the itty bitty little mistakes that make it a little more interesting and would give it, the texture flag. So yeah, it isn't the most exciting texture.
No.
This one over here, I noticed, was just incredibly realistic. And one thing I wanted to point out was the attention to value in a lot of these, and even the direction of the line work that they're using. how in some areas they decide to smudge, in other areas they keep things very sharp and crisp and clear. There you go.
You betcha.
So a lot of the times with texture, creating something this incredibly realistic just takes paying a lot of attention to your elements. And what I typically find myself doing when I'm working with texture is kind of trying to count and look at different patterns. So for example, this is one that you might seem familiar after all the different designs and line work we did last week. But whenever I do something like this, I will literally count to myself, okay, I've got a highlight, a dark shadow, and then a light shadow, and then a dark shadow. So I'm seeing the highlight, darker, lighter, darker, just trying to get a little pattern in mind so that I don't miss something. It's funny how easily the left-right battle in our brain will sort of cancel out some of the obvious details that you would think you wouldn't be able to miss. So you're going to get to see how that all works whenever we're doing our texture segment. So with that brief overview, just kind of wanted to let your eyes see a lot of different textures, shapes, and forms to spark up and be ready to draw tonight. If you would all please make sure you've got your pencils and sketchbooks at the ready. And we are going to get to drawing. So the first thing that we're going to do is transform a circle into a sphere. And I'm going to do a close-up view before we switch, and I will show you exactly what I'm drawing as I'm drawing it. And these are a few important terms that are very helpful to know as you continue working with form. And one thing that I did want to mention that I noticed from our comments over the past week, one thing that we're learning, as well as just the pencil or pen to page, working out those little micro muscles in our hands, we're also learning the vocabulary that's really going to help us become more effective artists and more effective art appreciators, as well as just to be able to talk to each other about art better. And the fact that we haven't been given a whole heck of a lot of words to use whenever we're drawing, unfortunately, to me, it just ties back to the kind of cruddy state of art education in the world these days. So the more that you're able to comment on each other's work, and I did want to spotlight Judith, gold star for you. Thank you so much. I noticed you were totally like one of the most active commenters out there, supporting everybody else's post and just saying lots of nice things. So just wanted to say awesome. And not only does that help support everyone else, but the more you're using the terminology, typing out these words and noticing, oh, well, would you look at that? Jane used a really great coarse shadow in her sphere this week. That's going to help you learn it as well. So by commenting, posting, using these words, it's reprogramming our brain and making us even better artists. So that's my spiel. And so the words here, we're not going to worry about all of these, but the words that I'd like you to remember whenever it comes to spheres especially are the highlight. And the highlight is the brightest area. That would be the most high value spot on your sphere or cube or whatever it might be, that's catching the light in the brightest way. And that's also showing us that's the thing that sticks out the most generally on your form. So the highlight is the brightest area. We see then in the sphere, you'll see the halftones. So halftones are those medium areas in your value scale that aren't your darkest or your very lightest. They're those half medium tones that are so important. Then very key here is the core shadow. Now this is a subtle difference between the value scales we were adding to our circles last week and to really make a sphere pop out of the page. So you'll notice that if we were looking to see where the value scale is here, gosh, I wish this didn't do the whole dark thing. When you get to the middle where the core shadow is, it's almost like a little crescent moon shape that is slicing in through the middle of our sphere. And the darkest area of the sphere is not at the opposite end of the highlight where you think it might be. So it's not that the circle or that the sphere goes from light to dark. It actually goes, again, thinking in patterns, light, dark, light again. And then on the table, there's that dark cast shadow. So light, dark, light, dark. And why is that? Well, there's this cool thing called reflected light. And we see this all around us in the world, but we just don't even have the vocabulary to think about it. So what happens is, of course, the highlight or the light that's shining down on the sphere in this case is not only hitting the sphere, it's also hitting the table or the surface that the sphere is sitting on. And that light actually bounces right back off the surface and is very subtly lighting the lower half of the sphere. So the reflected light is the slightly lighter spot or area that in this case is toward the bottom of the sphere. So highlight, coarse shadow, and reflected light, got all your halftones in between. And then you can remember that the cast shadow is also going to have some of your darkest darks of your sphere. So this is what we're about to draw. And before we dive in, does anybody want to wave, or do you have any questions? Oh, hey, Naomi, didn't see you pop in here.
I know I'm having trouble getting my technology together, but I'm here.
Yay!
I'm here.
Awesome. So great to see you. Welcome, welcome. So we're talking about the elements.
I hear you.
So any questions? Y'all want to wave before we get started? Okay, groovy. So what I'm going to have you do is go ahead and do your best to take a pencil and draw a circle on your page. And if you're not comfortable drawing a circle, hopefully there's some kind of something around you that you can actually trace. That is not cheating. Hey, look at you. Naomi's prepared.
I'm ready.
She's got the circle dealio. Okay, and I'm just going to freehand a quick sphere, and hopefully y'all can sort of see that. I've drawn this so lightly, it's almost impossible to see on the page. Let me go ahead and make it darker. It's just a circle. And the most important thing to get started with is knowing in advance where your light is coming from. I'm going to be doing this all in pencil tonight. So if you ever did want to challenge yourself to do it in pen, we would just use all of the same techniques that we use to create our line value scales in pen here on the sphere. So I've drawn just a little kind of sparky thing here to show this is where my light is going to be coming from. Now I'm going to be very carefully using the wider edge of my pencil. So I'm not going to be going in to draw my shading like this, where the tip is the only part touching. I'm going to do my best to get kind of a soft, broad line stroke. So what I often do is I'll lightly draw a little sort of oval, or I guess you call it an ellipse, where the highlight is going to be hitting in that top corner of the page. Can you all see that all right? Give me a thumbs up.
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
Wonderful. And this comes right back to our value scale. So I've really tried to order this month's element challenge so that we'll be building these skills one after another in a way that's going to really help make sense of how to best use these elements. So right now I'm just coming around, and it looks like I've just drawn a little bit of a magic 8-ball, because I've got one spot that is highlighted, and the rest of my sphere is sort of just a subtle, second dark down on the value scale shade. So pretty darn light. I'm not going in for my darkest darks yet. And I'm just going to pop real quick again every now and then. I want y'all to see that,
Model.
the model. So y'all can be looking at that. And I'll tell you what, I'll leave this model up. Mine is backwards, and I'll just be verbally leading you through what I'm doing, and I'll pop back in as needed with the next steps. So notice how very light, it's almost like the sphere has been cut in half, but notice that the line, if you want to call it that, where we see the core shadow that's labeled there, it's not a straight line that is dissecting this sphere in half. It's sort of like the latitude or longitude lines of planet Earth. So it's like a ring that is wrapping around the sphere. If you imagine a ring or a string that was making its way around here. I'm adding just more and more pressure to my pencil as I start to increase the shading in that core shadow area of the sphere. And I'm going to pop in real quick just so you can see what mine is looking like. And it's so funny. Actually, I recommend that you all, if you're ever not sure about a drawing, stop and take a photograph of it, and then you can see it again through a different lens. And I swear, every time you see all your mistakes, because just as soon as I popped that up on this big screen, I said, oh, well, look at that. That's not the right angle. So when I was looking at my model, I felt like my darkest dark, that core shadow, is a little bit too stripy. I don't want there to be a really intense dark stripe of the core shadow. I want it to really gradually fade. So now I'm coming back with slightly lighter pressure, and I'm blending downward and away from the core shadow just to make it look like a more natural blend. Then I can come back in a moment and increase my darkest value, because I'm still not all the way up to my darkest values yet. I'll pop in my image again real quick. So I just softened that up, and I tried to fix the sphere a little bit. I feel like it's coming along. And now I'm ready to add the darkest dark value. So if you got it, you can use a darker graphite pencil if anybody has some fancy graphite set. And if you don't, then you're just going to press down really hard with your regular pencils. So I'm not pressing down pretty intensely, kind of making a dent in the page to emphasize that core shadow. And if you're already ahead of me, then you can try a different bit of smudging, or you could even go ahead and do a second sphere. I know some of us are fast, and that's one thing I just love to watch as a teacher, the differences in speed and style of all of the students. And I hope you notice that as I'm continuing my sphere, getting all those three-dimensional values right where they need to be, I'm still leaving a little bit of a highlight where that reflected light is going to go. And if you don't mind getting your fingers messy, this is not a bad time to come in and smudge with your fingers. That's what I'm working on right now. I'll just show you where I've left things so far. So I've been smudging a little bit with my fingers, starting to see a little bit more three-dimensionality. Yeah, and there's one thing that's still noticeably missing. That is the cast shadow. So let me show you how I'm going to do my cast shadow. If you think about where your light source is coming from, your cast shadow is really going to fit inside of that. So I just went ahead and made sort of an example of a line coming down from my my lighting source, and it's going, actually my shadow is going to go all the way off the page. I just made this pool by making an ellipse of where the shadow is going to go by doing that. Okay, yes, Judith. And I think I saw Kathy.
It seems like your cast shadow is much bigger, though, than the sphere.
Yes. It all depends on the lighting. If you imagine that you had a light bulb and you were holding it closer, farther apart, at different angles from your sphere, it shifts in all kinds of crazy ways. You don't have to draw your shadow the way I'm drawing mine, but when you look on the Pinterest links that I'll add later, you'll be able to see that there's a whole science and perspective of drawing shadows that you really don't need to know to still have some effective drawings, but can be very helpful. And let me show you the difference, Judith. This would be to fit the page better. I'm going to do just like a quick sample. I'm also, when I'm making the cast shadow, I'm going ahead and I'm letting this be the darkest dark on the page. So here's what it's looking like. There we go.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah. So
it still seems too big to me. Doesn't work with the sphere for me. But that's
yeah. And again, it would be the lighting differences that would change that. When you get on the Pinterest, if you want to find your own sphere examples, the ones that are in our drawing schedule are all much smaller. I guess I just got a big shadow. Cast a big shadow. So, you can make your cast shadow as big as you want. So I would come in, I would really amp this up and make it even darker. And then once I've got the darkest dark of the cast shadow, I'm going to increase the darkness of that core shadow and come in and even erase a little bit, that highlight, just to really amp it up and give it that full range, hopefully. So it's really subtle, but I hope you can see that I came in and had a little bit of a difference of that highlight erased here to create the sphere. And let me pop up again for you ladies the big screen sphere. And then if anybody is feeling brave, I'd love to see what you've ended up with. Ooh, awesome. Naomi, that looks great. Here, I'm gonna stop the share real quick and pop up. What are you working with there, Naomi? Is that
what
pencil that you're using or charcoal?
It's a pencil.
Wow.
It's a pencil.
Hold it up again.
Fabric has it's a 4B.
Oh, 4B. Yeah, would you hold that sphere up again one more time? The drawing?
Pastel.
Faber-Castell is...
Oh, the drawing, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
My drawing.
Oh, la la.
Really good.
Yeah. And were you finger smudging that, Naomi? Using your finger to smudge?
Yes. Yes.
Got the evidence to show.
Yep.
Fabulous.
For this.
Yes, so Naomi is using a 4B, so that really makes a big difference of the intensity of dark you can get. If you happen to have a fancy drawing set, they're wonderful to use. Anybody else want to show off what you got? Here I got Judith. Ooh la la, Judith.
Yay.
Very nice. Yeah, looking wonderful.
Floating intel.
And if you have to pick one spot to be the darkest dark, they say that it's usually the cast shadow right underneath where the sphere meets the shadow tends to be the very darkest. And Diane, I think I saw you had something to show us.
I have a question.
Sure thing.
We're doing this in white. This is our white ball, right?
Ooh.
What if we did it in black? Do we and we're still working in pencil? I mean, not white, no white marker. How do you do black?
So if you wanted to use a black background page, is that really the question?
No, black ball. What if it?
Oh, a black ball. Well, I would say the best thing to do is to find a black ball.
And try it.
Yeah, and try it and see what it looks like. And otherwise, you would just amp up the value so that everything is a lot darker. And if you really wanted to do a black ball, you could get a toned paper, like a gray or a brown paper that starts with a medium. And then ideally you would have a white pen or pencil and a black one, and then you could do some
I know, but
like
I'm
that.
talking about doing it with my number 2, my
Yeah.
my Dixon or whatever it is, my Ticonderoga.
I bet you could do it. Oh, Ticonderoga. I bet you could find a model to look at online, or if you have your own black marble and draw from life. But no matter what, these same principles are going to apply. So you're going to have your highlight. Somewhere in there is going to be the core shadow. The cast shadow would probably still be the darkest. And then it would be all about really paying attention to where your highlights are to show if there's any type of texture that's coming through.
Can you say again about the core shadow? Suppose this were a box with the core shadow, with obviously box shape.
Well, I'm so glad you asked, because we're going to go ahead and shift gears and draw a cube, just the absolute most basic beginner cube. I want to show y'all step by step how I do it if I'm drawing an imaginary cube. And then we'll talk about where the shadows would fall. So let me share my screen real quick just to show what I'm talking about. And here, no, go away thingy. Wait, no, stop.
Have the same cast of shadows.
We have the same cast of shadows. So here in this cube, you can see that in general with cubes, whenever we're seeing 3 faces is the most sides of a cube that you can generally see all at once. We're going to have one face of the cube that is the highest value. So that's where the light is hitting the cube the brightest. We're going to have a medium toned face, and then the core shadow would be the darkest face that is getting the least amount of sun. But even here, I hope you notice that we're still seeing that reflected light sort of bouncing back off of the table, and it's creating an effect on the darkest face of the cube where some of it has a little bit of a glow to it, but there right at the kind of, what do you call it, the apex, or the part where all those little lines meet is showing you that brightest, medium, and darkest cube. So if you're feeling confident about cubes, you're welcome to jump right in. I know a lot of us are cube masters. And if you've never drawn a cube before, if you don't feel great about drawing cubes, I'm going to invite you to start by just drawing a simple square on your page. It can be a regular square. It can be a not that accurate looking square. And I'm going to pop up on my big screen so you can see how I'm sorting my way through this. I was drawing my own eye while I was waiting for everybody, so pardon that. So we've got simple square here. And then lighter, I'm going to not use as much pressure, but I'm going to have like an echoing square that's sort of hovering behind this square, just so you can see what I'm doing. Let me get it on the page real quick. So now I have 2 squares that are overlapping. There's sort of a square behind the square. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm creating 2 of the faces of the cube. Now I'm going to connect them with lines, and that's all you have to do is find the corresponding corner of each square to square. So I've started with this corner here, and I'm connecting it with the corresponding corner of the back cube. And I do the same thing with each edge of my cube. And there you have it. This is not necessarily in any type of perspective, which we'll talk about perspective next week. But this is a believable cube. Now, if you don't want your cube to be see-through, you would erase the lines that are inside of the shape of the cube we just drew. So let me show you what that looks like. Once you've erased the lines that were once inside of that cube, now, just like you saw in our example, we have 1, 2, 3 faces to our cube. 1 is a perfect square. And once we start shading this, it's really going to look like a believable cube. So if you want to decide where your light source is coming from, you can take a minute to get your darkest, medium, and lightest values on here. I'm going to make mine really quick and sketchy because we still have one more little sketch to do today. So quick and dirty cube looks something like this. I've got my medium, lightest, and darkest faces of the cube. And then if this were my light source, sorry, Judith, what was the question?
Your light source was from the top on that.
Yes.
Kind of on the side top.
Exactly. So in this case, oh gosh, and cubes are I'm really bad at cube shadows. I think the cube shadow would be something like this. I need to look at a real model. So I'll just show you, I'm beginning to sketch in my cube shadow down at the bottom here, but let me show you the example so that you can use them, not me. Yeah, their cube shadows, much better. And whenever you are looking for forms throughout the week, I'll be posting the Pinterest links. So you're very welcome to play around and look on Pinterest if you are a Pinteresting person, and use an example there. So the next step of our fun for this evening is going to be all about adding texture to these simple forms that we've created. So for the sake of time, I think I'm going to just go ahead and show you our weekly schedule first, and you'll be able to see how we would apply some of the different textures that we're going to be playing around with to our forms. So, are any questions or comments? If you want to wave a hand, everybody looks very focused. Linda, yeah? Go ahead.
Where do we post the, I actually did homework this week.
Yay!
Where do we post it?
Excellent. So let me pull up the main website super quick and have another kind of question about that. So let me go ahead and answer you now. Once you're in our main page here at 10 Steps to Drawing, you would go to where you see your picture or whatever your profile looks like, and you'd add that plus just right here in the main group. You can add your photograph, and then I'm just going to arbitrarily add something. I think I've got some elements here. And here is where you have the option to add the theme of this month. What you would do is you would come up here to where it says add topic, or if you're on your phone, for me, it asks me this as I'm ending the post. It'll say, you forgot a topic. Do you want to add a topic? If you wanted to add a topic, you would say elements of art. That's our theme for the week. And then you post it. You could, of course, also love to hear if there was anything that you had a problem with or really had a great time doing. So you would then post that work. Now, once you post it, everything for this latest Elements of Art challenge is just, if you scroll down, you'll see what everybody's posting. But if you really want to see only what we've been doing this past week so far, you can come to the sidebar where it says topics, and here under Elements of Art, if anybody throughout this past month, it's through the month of August.
Feels like a month.
Yeah. Then it's all going to be here in the topics section. And here's also, whenever I post a replay of our videos or anything like that, then it's going to be here in the Elements of Art topic. So finally, let's talk about texture and adding to our forms. So we definitely were creating textures last week whenever we started thinking about line. And here I'm sure you recognize some of those contour lines, some of the stippling, the scribbles, the hatching, all of these fun different varieties and qualities of line that we've been messing with. And here we see them applied to these cute little milk cartons. That is the idea for this week's homework. We're going to be taking textures and applying them to the different forms that we've been creating. So this I'm going to link to, so you're going to be able to get inspiration, get different ideas for the different types of texture you want to create whenever you get to this section. But essentially, this is what we're going for. I thought this was such a cool example of just how you can apply everything we've learned so far. So here we see the line work coming in to create the value. I'm so in love with like this sort of wood-looking cube over here. But it wouldn't look like a cube if it wasn't also for the really subtle shading. And if anything, I would say this artist could add more shading to make it look even more three-dimensional and give it even more form. But they're also paying attention to the shapes. So just like when we created our cube, we started with the square, add another square, connect it, and then boom. So in some of these cube examples, like here, this one that looks like fur, the shape has been a little bit lost due to the texture, but at least they've got enough shading and value that we can still tell that it's supposed to look like a cube. So that's the idea. Now, for the sake of time, I think we're going to have to skip doing a texture drawing together this week. And instead, I'm going to go ahead and go into an overview of our Elements of Art calendar for this week. Any thoughts or questions about form and texture and value so far? Okay. So let's check it out. Week 2. So same homework or same timing as last week. What you're going to do is for 5 days a week, so you get 2 days off, you're going to draw for 30 minutes a day. Go ahead and set your timer, because I don't know about you, but this element stuff, once I get started, I just can't stop. So I would try and sit down for 30 minutes, and every time it would turn into an hour. So
True.
I don't know. Yeah. So it's fun. But yeah, once you get in that right brain thinking, time flies. So with all of these, it's up to you. If you'd like to use pencil or pen, I'm going to recommend that you work primarily in pencil. And then if you'd like to come in afterward and put pen on top, go for it. So day 1, all about shapes. I'm recommending that you create anywhere from 4 to 6 small squares in your sketchbook, sort of like how we did with our little squares of value scales, or when we did the circles filled with designs last week. And you're welcome to use these examples here to create patterns. You can use repetition, or you can do something almost more like a mandala, or you can see in the top corner there, we've got a sort of Native American inspired design. So you can create your own shape patterns, look around the world around you to see if there's anything, any shapes that pop out. So you're going to be looking around you for shapes or creating your designs for day 1. Day 2 is when we're going to just practice forms. So this is the closest to math class that I think anything I ever teach will be. So you can copy these exact same forms here, and if any of them are too complicated, just keep practicing a cube over and over again. Or if it's too easy, you can follow the link for the Pinterest page and look at any different form that you like there. So you can draw them 3-dimensional, or you can draw that, I'm sorry, not 3-dimensional, but see-through, like you see here with the little dotted lines, or you can draw them as you see around you. Another option would be to look around and say, what do I see in my environment that is a form that I could draw? So I could say my water bottle, we've got a cylinder, a lime, another little sphere. So if you feel up to the challenge, you're absolutely welcome to draw from any of the objects you see around you. Day 3, we're really adding in that value. So not just doing the forms themselves that are just simple geometry, but thinking about where is the light coming in, making sure you've got that full range of light to dark. And my tip for your third day is to practice the value scale at the bottom of the page before you begin, just to really warm up that full range of value. Let me see if I'm just going to close in here. On day 4, we're going to begin day 4 in the same way that you began day 2. So here you see some spheres and cubes. What I would do is I would start using a pencil and really lightly drawing the simple form. So just the cube with no texture, or just the sphere before it's a sphere is a circle, to get a sense of where things are going to fit on the page. Then you're going to come back and do your best, thinking back to last week to all of the line and different types of line that we practiced. Do your very best to recreate either these textures or textures that you find on the Pinterest pages that I'm going to be sharing throughout the week. So for the next 5 days, you'll get a different Pinterest post in alignment with whatever's coming out on here. So you can keep an eye out for that and keep getting on the website and posting. And then same thing for day 5. I'm recommending day 5, you can attempt to do cylinders. Any texture you want, you can try these, you can make your own. And what's really going to make the difference here is not just creating the texture itself, but thinking about where the light is hitting and where that texture appears lighter and where it appears darker. And I'm hoping that it's approachable by day 4 and 5. I do recognize that this might be like extra scary for some of us. So if you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I want to crumple up my paper and burn my sketchbook, this is not working with the texture forms, please do not feel frustrated. Just draw the texture and don't worry about the form. So if you have to pick, we want to cover shape, form, and texture this week. If you don't want to combine texture and form, just do the texture and let it be a flat, texture on a page and not a texturized cylinder or anything like that. So please know if it's frustrating, that was my problem, not yours. And you can just, ease off and find what feels right for you. Because again, everybody's got their different strengths and weaknesses when it comes to the elements. And I know for me, texture is the hardest. So yes. That is our next 5 days laid out. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to do the texture today. I'm going to go ahead and unmute us all. So if anybody has any thoughts, questions, comments, notes about last week, how everything went for you, I'd love to hear. Yeah, Diane.
I have. I'm talking to my friend Charles in Boston, and he's liking that I'm painting. And he says to me, he's on his way to a fine arts at Fine Arts. And I said to him, I said, Charles, you know everything. Is there something like bon appetit for have a good painting? Like break leg for actors?
Huh.
What do we have to say to each other that says, break a paintbrush or
Break a brush.
Break a brush.
a brush? There you go. But no, our own saying for bon appetit.
Bon
Break
appetit.
a pencil, it's drawing.
I like it. Break a pencil. I think
that's deeper even.
I love it. I'm going to write that down. That has to be our new motto. Break a pencil.
Right, so like a sign off,
I love it.
Okay.
That will be what I ship you off with today once we're all done.
Well, I told him I thought of Gertrude Stein, and you remember her word about not being hangable, inaccrochable.
Oh.
It's not. It's French. And so I told him to make it hangable. Fait accrochable.
Accrochable. Oh my gosh. I can do Spanish. But I don't think
Sounds like it.
Don't even go there. But it was a joke for her because she, there's no such word in French as inaccrochable. The word was hangable,
Unhangable or unhangable. Yeah. Well, what I love about that is the idea of having rituals around drawing, like I was a big theater kid. Yeah, you hear break a leg and you're like, all right, I'm ready. I'm pumped up. I know what to do. So hopefully that's what this community gets to be for us, is just that little ritual that we have that keeps us coming back to the sketchbook and hanging out with our artistic community. So any other comments or notes or questions about how things went last week? And
I was just surprised at what I thought was going to happen and what actually happened.
Mhm.
And what actually happened was that the attention to detail and the precision and the focus took a half an hour easily each time. And I was like, I thought I'd be bored, but I wasn't. And then I was really upset that nobody was posting except for me and Diane and you. And then today I found everybody else's posts. So I was happy.
Good. Yay. Yes, we all have to post to keep Judith happy. So you hear that?
I'm behind, but I'll post.
Yes,
What?
yeah. She's the ultimate poster, so we got to keep up with her. And if you're confused or if you have any questions, this is where we're going to go ahead and shift over to our technology tour. So if you are feeling good about the website, and Judith, I'm going to get back to you about that email and check in on everything there. So thank you for that. But yeah, if you're feeling good about the drawing and posting, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And
Bye, everyone.
in the group.
Bye.
Bye,
See you
Judith.
next week.
Pencil.
See you next week.
Break a pencil.
Break a pencil.
Bye. Thank you.